Hi, in this tutorial I will introduce a database design and modeling using a tool called DB Designer. Here you see an example of DB Designer. You get access to this tool from this URL. So basically, DB Designer is an online tool for database design and modeling for creating so-called entity relationship diagrams. You can also export the entity relationship diagram as so-called SQL Scripts, and it has support for many databases like SQL Server from Microsoft, MySQL, PostgreSQL, Oracle, etc. This means that you can create an entity relationship diagram and then export that diagram to the database system that you are using. In this tutorial, I will focus on SQL Server. This database designer tool, as mentioned, is an online tool, so you use it inside your web browser. You just need to create an account and log in, and then you are ready to use it. You can use it for free, but it has also paid options. It has a free option for academic use, non-profit and open source project. You can also share your entity relationship diagram with others, so you can collaborate and work together on one or more diagrams. In order to start using it, just go to their homepage, create an account and log into the system, and then you're ready to start using it. Before we start using this tool, DB Designer, let's get an overview of some database design fundamentals. So here you see a basic example of an entity relationship diagram, shortened ERD or just ER diagram. So basically that's a visual representation of a database, and it shows the different entities. So this is one entity and this is another entity, and it shows the relationship between the entities. So in this case, you have two entities, one called sensor, which are storing information regarding the sensor, description, sensor types, etc. And then you have here the entity, the data entity, which is storing data for each sensor. And then in order to do that, we also need to have a relationship between those two tables. So in this entity, we have a so-called primary key called sensor ID. And in the data entity, we have a so-called foreign key, which is the relationship between these two tables. So here we have the primary key, and here we have the foreign key that creates the relationship between these two entities. So then let's summarize. So we have what we call an entity, or also called a table. So in this case, we have one table or one entity here and another table or entity here. And in each entity or table, we have a so-called primary key, which is a unique key in each entity. And then we have the relationship between one or more tables. And the relationship is defined by this, the primary key and the foreign key in the second table. And also in each table or entity, we have what we call columns or attributes that store specific information regarding that entity. So in this case, we have attributes or columns called sensor ID, which is the primary key in this case, sensor name, description, company, sensor type. So these are attributes or columns in that entity or table. And then we have the same here. Data ID is the primary key in this table or entity. And then we have the sensor ID, which is the foreign key, and that's the relationship between this table and this table. And then we have other attributes or columns, in this case value, timestamp, and then we could of course have other attributes, etc., but those are just some examples. And also for each column or attributes, we can also specify a specific data type. It could be typically integer for the primary key, and attributes or columns like sensor name, description, etc. typically are a text or a varchar. And then we have here in this case, timestamp typically is a datetime data type. Then we can have also other types of data like boolean, float, double for values. Here we store the specific value for each of the sensors, and then typically such a value could be a temperature value, 22.6 degrees Celsius or something. So then we typically need to use a double or a float for that specific data type. So in order to create such entity relationship diagrams, you typically need a software tool. Typically there exist hundreds of different tools for creating entity relationship diagrams. Some of these tools cost a lot of money, while other tools are free. And also some tools are specialized for database design and modeling by creating so-called entity relationship diagrams, while other tools are just general purpose diagram tools, like you can basically use PowerPoint for creating entity relationship diagrams. But in general, the advantages by using a specialized tool for this is that after you have created the entity relationship diagram, you can export that diagram, so it will be part of your database system like SQL Server from Microsoft or MySQL, etc. So here you see such an example of an entity relationship diagram. So this diagram has been created with the DB designer that we will show some examples of later in this tutorial. But here is a basic ERD of a student or university system, where we have an entity for school, we have an entity for course, we have entities for students, class, teacher, and also an entity where we can enter specific grades in specific courses for specific students, etc. So later we will create a similar entity relationship diagram using this DB designer tool. Before we start using this DB designer tool, let's go through some basic database tips and tricks. First, I recommend that you use uppercases in your table name. So if you go back to our example, so here is the name of the table or entity. So you have school, class, student, course, teacher, etc. So it's recommended that you use uppercases for your table names, and then you can use something called Pascal notation for the different attributes or columns within each table. It's also recommended that you use singular form for the table names. So typically you should use customer and not customers, as you see here. So I'm using class, not classes, student, not students, course, not courses, teacher, not teachers, etc. By doing that, it's easy to see or remember the names of the different tables or entities. And as mentioned, I also recommended that you use Pascal notation for the columns or attributes. And typically also you should use English language when naming both the tables and the columns. So here you see I'm using this Pascal notation for the columns. So I'm using school name with an uppercase S and an uppercase N. So this is what we call Pascal notation. The same here, class name, an uppercase C and an uppercase N, class code, first name, last name, etc., student number. So basically, use Pascal notations for your column names, and then use uppercases for the table names. Also, it's recommended that you just create so-called unique running numbers for your primary keys. So in our case, in the school table, we have a primary key called school ID, And here in the class we have a primary key called class ID. In the student table we have a primary key called student ID. So all these are just running numbers that increase with 1 for each record that we put into these tables. And by making this happen, we can specify that these columns should be so-called identity 1-1. That means that they start with 1 and then increase with 1 every time you insert a new record in these tables. One final thing, it's also important when you specify data types. Typically you shouldn't use too many different data types. You should stick with a few data types. Then it's easier to remember the data type that you have used when you are going to use them in queries and creating stored procedures, etc. So typically you stick to 2-3 different types like integer or int, varchar. For dates you could use data type. And for numbers, typically use either integer or float or double for numbers or values that has decimal values. One more thing, you should also use descriptive names both for your tables and for your columns. So here, typically use teacher name. Then there's no doubt that what this column is storing. Basically, it's storing the name of the teacher. Here, grade, here you are storing the grade. Student number, here you are storing the student number. Here you are storing the first name, last name for that specific student, etc. So that's some recommended tips and tricks when creating your entity relationship diagrams. Now that we know the basics about entity relationship diagrams, let's dig into this DB Designer tool. So as mentioned earlier, this is an online tool that you use inside your web browser. You just create an account and log in, and then you're ready to use it. You can create entity relationship diagrams, but you can also export your entity relationship diagrams as so-called SQL scripts. This makes it easy to create your database in different database systems like SQL Server, MySQL, Postgre, Oracle, etc. This DB Designer tool, you can use it for free, and especially if you are an academic user, you can use it for free. So let's start using this tool. Let's go to this web page, see how we can create an account and log into the system. So here is the web page for this DB Designer tool, www.dbdesigner.net. So here you find some information regarding the system, features, different plans, etc. And as you click here, academic and non-profit plans. If you are an academic, either student or educator, you can use this tool for free. So basically, let's start by using this tool by just start designing for free. Then typically the first time you need to create an account with a username and a password, but I have already created it, so now I'm logged into the DB Designer tool, and then you have the dashboard where you have your different entity relationship diagrams here, and then you can easily create a new one by clicking this new project button, or you can open an existing one. So the main features here, you can click on this one to create a new project or a new entity relationship diagram. You can click on dashboard to open existing one. Here you can edit them, delete them. You can share them with other members. So here on the teams, you can also invite other team members so that you can collaborate on creating these entity relationship diagrams. You can also export these diagrams to so-called SQL scripts, which makes it easy to create your database in a database system like SQL Server, MySQL, etc. And also here in the upper corner, you have some settings. You can choose between dark and light mode. You can choose also a language. or you can go here under your profile, then you have your dashboard, which is here. You can also go into account details, where you can change your password, etc. But let's start creating a new entity relationship diagram. Then I just click on new project, and then you can start by using a template or just create from scratch. So then let's create this example that I have shown earlier, this student system. So then just name it student system or something. Create a new schema. Click also here under generic. You can also specify which database system that you want to use, either generic or MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL, etc. So I will focus on using Microsoft SQL Server, and I select MySQL and create a new schema. Then it will be created here. So now by default it will just be an empty space. So now we are actually ready to start creating the different tables or entities. So then let's start creating some entities. Then I can just, or tables. So then just click on the small icon in the upper corner here, new table, and then specify the name of the table. So let's start creating a school table like this. Then I can click save and just update, and then you see that specific table has been created. By default it's just an ID and an integer, but let's then you can click on it and click on this pen for edit the diagram, and then here we can create the different attributes or columns. So then let's start by creating the primary key, typically school ID. Then you can specify a data type. Since this typically is an integer and just a running number, then I just specify integer. Here you can specify different things, but here you specify it should be a primary key. Since it's a primary key, it cannot be, you cannot allow null values, so then this has to be disabled. Primary key is by default unique values. Here I specify auto increment, meaning this primary key is just increased by 1 each time you put in a new record. So I have also different values here, but let's start with this one, and then you can click on the plus in order to insert a new column. And let's say we need to have school name. School name typically should be a text, or you can also use this varchar, this one. And then using the varchar you can also specify a size, number of characters. Typically for a school name you typically need to have 50 or 100 or something, but it's recommended that you stick to few different types. So typically when I use varchar, I either use 100 or 50 or something, not too many different variations. The school name is not a primary key. Typically you shouldn't allow null, and here you typically want it to be a unique name for your school, so then you select this one. This shouldn't be auto increment, etc. And also it's not a foreign key, so then just click save here. So now you see we have created the school table. It has a primary key called school ID, and it has another column called school name. Then you can easily add more columns. Typically we want to have website. That could also be a varchar 100. This may also be unique, so you can also set unique or not. Typically you can just leave it like this. In addition, we typically need an address for the university, and then address. And that one could also be varchar 100 like this, and then click save. So now basically we have created one table. I can increase it here so it's easier to see it. One table called school with some attributes or columns. So in addition to edit it, you can also set the color using different colors. So the default is blue, but you can change it to gray, whatever. Here you can also copy it or clone it, or you can delete it. But let's create another entity or another table. So then I select another table. So assume this school or university has multiple classes. So then I can create a new table called class with a primary key called class ID. Typically, since this should be the primary key, it's an integer. Then set this primary key. It should be a unique and auto increment. Let's add some more fields. It could be class name, which is typically a varchar. Typically the class name should be unique, so we can set this one. We typically need a unique class code. That could also be a varchar. So then typically a class code could typically be varchar 10 or something, while this class name could be varchar 50 or 100. So I set it to 50. Typically this class code should be unique. We can also assume that you have two equal class names like this. So then we need to specify a unique class code like this. And also we want to link this class table to this other table that we created, this school table. So then we create another field, and here we specify the primary key. So then I specify school ID as a foreign key, and then I specify integer, and then here I specify foreign key, and then I need to specify where I find the primary key, which should be in the school table, and the column in that table. So that's the primary key, and this is the foreign key. So the primary key, school ID, is in the school table, and in order to link the class and the school table, we also need to create a foreign key. Typically we should use the same name, but you don't need to use the same name for the foreign key and the primary key, but it's typically a good practice. So then I click just save, click update, and then you see also how the relationship between the school table and the class table. So here you have the school ID, which is the primary key. Here we have the class table and the class ID primary key, and then you have the foreign key, school ID, that are linking this table to this school table like this. So this arrow defines the relationship between these two tables, but you can also specify different types of relationships. So let's just open this or edit this class table, go to the foreign key column, and then here at the end you see relationship type, and then you have different types: one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, or many-to-one. So typically the most used relationship is this one. That means that for each school you can have multiple types. So then there will be one-to-many relationship, and then you see this symbol here. It's a crowfoot notation indicating this is a many-to-one relationship, because for each school you can have one or more classes. So before we start creating another table, let's go through some of the features here in DB Designer. Here on the left side we have something called markup. Basically we can create one or more tables in this designer, but you can also create or change existing tables using this markup, meaning you can just type the names of the tables, columns, etc., and then the thing you write here will be automatically updated and created here in the diagram. So you can either create these tables and relationships in this designer, or you can create it here in this markup language. Typically I just want to use the designer, then I can just hide this markup like this. And here on the right side you have something called schema properties, where you can specify different properties. You can hide information, etc. Let's say you just want to show the school table and not the class table in your diagram. I can just click here in order to hide it. If I want it back, I can click here in order to show it. Or if you just want to show some specific columns, I can just click here in order to hide them or show them again like this. You can also specify different colors. Here this is blue. I can change this to this gray color. I can change this table to this color. So you can specify different colors for the different tables, etc. And then here you see you have the same colors here. So if I click on this gray one, I only see so this means I will either show or hide all the tables that has this color. If I want to hide this one, I can just click here in order to hide this one, or show it like this. So then you can easily group your tables by using different colors, and then you can easily hide or show different parts of your entity relationship diagram like this. Also here in this settings icon, you have different options. You can choose between dark mode or light mode. You can choose language. You can choose line colors. You can choose line types. So the default is this one. You can choose straight. Then you will get straight lines like this. Or you can use flow chart. So typically it's up to you what kind of line types you want to use. I like this one, Bezier, like this. But you can choose whatever line type you want to use, and you can choose different colors. You can also change the background here. You can choose to show or hide this grid. So now it's just white background. If you want to have grids, you can select this one, etc. And then you can click here to show the markup, here to hide or show the schema properties like this. If you want more space for your tables, you can hide them. And also here on the top here you have this student system ERD diagram we created, but you can also click here in order to create new entity relationship diagrams. So far we have created two tables, schools and class, and now next typically we need to have some students in the different classes. So then we can create a new table called student. And then typically the primary key then should be just student ID like this, which is should be an integer, primary key, unique, and auto increment like this. Then you can create more columns for that specific table. Typically a first name for the student, last name. Perhaps we need a unique student number because there could be multiple students with the same first name and last name, so then we need to have a unique student number. And so let's say this student ID is a primary key. First name isn't unique and the last name isn't unique, but the student number needs to be so we need not allow null, and we need to specify that it should be unique like this. You can click save, and then the student table has been created. But typically also we want to link the student and the class table, because a specific student belongs to a specific class. So then let's click edit and also create the foreign key. So in this case it will be the class ID, and then we need to specify foreign key, and the primary key should be in the class table and the class ID column. And then we need to specify the relationship type. So typically this is a one-to-many relationship, but since now I'm on the foreign key table, I need to select many to one, like this. Click save, and then you see the relationship between these two tables has been created. And then you see this one-to-many relationship. That means in each class we can have one or more students. And then the relationship between these two tables are these class ID, which is the primary key here, and the foreign key here. I can also specify proper data types here. So the student ID is an integer. First name is typically this text, or I prefer this varchar. It could be varchar 50. Last name varchar 50 or 100. Assuming you have a long last name, it could be 100. Student number could also be a combination of text or number. So then I also specify varchar here. Typically it's a 10 digits number or whatever, and it has to be unique like this. So then click save. Also for the class ID, of course I need to specify the data type, which is integer, the same as the primary key. Click save. So now we have created three different tables. We can create more tables. We could have a table called course with a primary key called course ID, which is an integer and auto increment. Then we have 4 tables. We typically need a table for teachers. So then we create a teacher table with a primary key called teacher ID. Note I'm using this Pascal notation here and uppercases here. So this is the primary key integer like this. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tables. So then typically in each, of course here we need to have some more columns. Typically we need to have a course name. Typically it should be a varchar. Could be varchar, let's say 50. And it could be unique, or we can create a specific course code that is unique. Assuming we have multiple courses with the same name, then this course ID is the unique identifier for each course. So then we set course ID to be unique like this. And that could also be a course code, could be a code that contains both numbers and values or integers. So then I just use varchar here also, typically a 10 digits code or something. And also you typically want to link this course to a specific school. So then I can create this foreign key relationships, and then I just type school ID, select integer, and then select foreign key, and then I find the school table and the school ID here. Click save, and then we have this relationship between the school and the course. Typically also we can of course also create more useful columns here, like semester, level, etc. Also we typically want to link the teacher to the course table, because in each course we need to have a teacher. So then I can also here edit this one and select another foreign key called teacher ID, which is an integer. And also this one is a foreign key, but this one is linked to the teacher table and the teacher ID column. I also specify this proper relationship type, one-to-many. So now we have the teacher is linked to the course, and the course is linked to the school, and we have students that are linked to a specific class like this. And we have used this one-to-many relationship. Here we have typically one teacher could have one or more courses, one class could have one or more students, one school could have one or more classes, and one school could have one or more courses like this. So finally, when we have created the necessary tables, this is just an example. You can create many more tables for this system. You can create many more columns in each of the different tables. But assume we are now finished and now want to create these tables in my SQL Server database. Then I just select export here, export SQL. Then I select, please select a database type, and I select, in my case, MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server. And then please select a script type. You have different options here. Just use the default. So you can either specify if you want to create the tables, drop the tables, alter, etc. Typically I just use create. Select this one and then click the export button. And then SQL ready, open downloads in a new tab, or you can do it later. I just select this one, and then all the exported SQL script are now stored under this folder, My Exports. So then if I want to use that one, then I can click here download, and it will be downloaded to my hard drive. Then I just go to the download folder. I have some previews here, so let's start by just deleting all of those and just select download once more. And then you see this student system will pop up, and then I can open my SQL Server Management Studio, which I have here. I have a local SQL Server here, and I'm using the SQL Server Management Studio in order to keep track of the tables, etc. So then I basically can right click here under databases, right click, create new database. I can just specify a new, I can call it student system or something. So that's the name of the database. Click OK, and then you see my database is created here. Then I can right click or just select new query, and then I can basically open this SQL query here, and then make sure that my new database are here in this drop down student system. And then you see an SQL script for the different tables has been created. Here is the SQL code for creating the table school. Here is this part for creating the class table, student table, etc. I'm not sure what this is, so I just delete that one, and the course table and the teacher table. And also here it adds the different foreign keys. So then basically I can just click here, execute, in order to create the different tables for this student system. So if I go here on the tables, you see that the class table has been created, the course table, school table, student and teacher table has been created. And then that's how you create an entity relationship diagram using this DB designer tool. And then you can easily export it as an SQL file in order to create the necessary tables in your database system, in our case SQL Server from Microsoft. So let's summarize. We have used the tool DB Designer to create an entity relationship diagram. DB Designer is an online tool that you use within your web browser to create an account and log into the system to start using it. When you have created an entity relationship diagram, you can export it as an SQL script in order to create your tables in your database systems like SQL Server, MySQL, etc. You can use this tool for free, but there are also some paid options. It's free for academic use. You start using it by going into this webpage, dbdesigner.net. If you are an academic user, either a student or an educator, you need to send an email to the company. So if you are a student, you need to send an email to the company at this email address, info@dbdesigner.net, and the subject line needs to be student request, where you request for this free edition of the DB Designer. If you are a professor or an educator, you need to do the same. You need to send an email to that customer at this email address, info@dbdesigner.net, where you say that you want to upgrade to this free educator or academic version of this DB Designer. So that's all. So thank you and goodbye.